I first noticed something was wrong when James wouldn't look me in the eye during our weekly team meeting. We'd been working together for 3 years at Westfield Analytics, building the company's client portfolio from a handful of local businesses to over 40 major accounts across New England. As senior analysts, we shared everything: late nights, impossible deadlines, and the pride of watching our small firm grow into something substantial. At least that's what I thought. The room felt unusually tense that Monday morning. Our director, Victoria, was reviewing quarterly numbers with unusual enthusiasm, praising specific client acquisitions I had no knowledge of. James kept glancing at his laptop, occasionally nodding at Victoria while the rest of the team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I caught Sarah from accounting giving me a look that bordered on pity. "And we're especially excited about the Parker Industries contract," Victoria announced, beaming at James. "It's the largest account we've landed to date, and it will transform our standing in the industry." Parker Industries. My stomach dropped. I'd been courting Parker's executive team for nearly 18 months. Weekly calls, personalized proposals, dinner meetings during my own family time, all my groundwork, all my research. I turned to James, who was now accepting congratulations from across the table. "When did this happen?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Victoria looked confused. "James finalized it last week, didn't he tell you?" The conference room suddenly felt airless. James had been my mentee when he first joined the company. I'd shown him our methodologies, introduced him to my contacts, even helped him negotiate his first raise. And now he'd somehow swooped in and closed my biggest prospective client without a word to me. "Must have slipped my mind," James said with a practiced casualness that told me it had been anything but an oversight. Things moved quickly after that dinner with their CFO. The dinner I was supposed to attend before James told me the meeting had been postponed due to a scheduling conflict with Parker's team. The dots connected with sickening clarity as I sat there, maintaining a professional smile while something vital collapsed inside me. After the meeting, I retreated to my office and closed the door. My desk was covered with Parker Industries, research, market analyses, competitive breakdowns, personal notes about their leadership team's preferences. 18 months of investment vaporized in a single meeting announcement. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Check your email from last Thursday, the one with the meeting notes from Victoria's executive review." I scrolled through my inbox and found it buried under weekend messages. There it was, in the middle of a routine update. James to take lead on Parker Industries acquisition following feedback about account preferences. My hands went cold. What feedback? What preferences? I'd built the relationship from nothing. The only thing that had changed was that James had started joining some of my calls 3 months ago to learn the process. As I stared out my office window at Boston's skyline, I realized this wasn't just about one account. My last 3 major prospects had all gone silent in recent weeks. How many other relationships had James redirected? How long had Victoria been planning this shift? The betrayal wasn't just that I'd lost Parker Industries. It was the calculated way it had happened. The pretense that everything was normal while the ground was being excavated beneath my feet. 10 years at Westfield, helping build it from a struggling consultancy to a respected firm. And this was how it ended, with a polite corporate execution in a Monday meeting. I closed my laptop. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Not yet. Not when I still had access to everything I needed to understand exactly what had happened. I texted back to Sarah. "Free for coffee after work?" Whatever was happening, I wouldn't face it in the dark. Sarah was already at the corner cafe when I arrived, 2 espressos on the table and a folder beside them. In the 5 years I'd known her, she'd never once brought work documents to our occasional coffee meetups. My pulse quickened. "They've been planning this for months," she said without preamble, sliding the folder toward me. "I probably shouldn't show you this, but what they're doing isn't right." Inside were printouts of email exchanges between Victoria, James, and the company's partners. The earliest was dated 4 months ago, right around when James had started joining my client calls. The most recent was from this morning with the subject line, "Transition plan complete." I scanned the contents, feeling a strange calm settle over me as I absorbed each new revelation. They weren't just transferring the Parker account. They were systematically reassigning all my major clients to James and 2 other junior analysts. Victoria had outlined a 3-month strategy to migrate client relationships without disruption, complete with talking points about how to frame my eventual departure. "They're pushing me out," I said, the words foreign in my mouth. Sarah nodded, grimly. "Victoria's been telling the partners you've lost your edge, that you're too traditional in your approach while James brings fresh methodology to the table." The espresso turned bitter on my tongue. Fresh methodology. I'd built those methodologies. I'd documented them, refined them, trained others to use them, including James. Now they were being wielded as evidence of my obsolescence. "Why tell me this?" I asked Sarah. "You're risking your position." "Because I watched you build half this company while Victoria was still jumping between firms trying to find somewhere that would make her partner." She tapped the folder. "And because they're doing the same thing to Marcus in operations and Diane in client services. Anyone who remembers the early days, anyone who might question Victoria's version of Westfield's success story." I thought of Marcus with his encyclopedic knowledge of our operational history, and Diane, whose client retention rates were legendary. Both had been with the company almost as long as I had. Both had seemed increasingly sidelined in recent meetings. "Keep these," Sarah said, pushing the documents toward me. "I've got copies secured. And I'd wipe your personal notes from the company servers. They're already talking about restricting access for departing team members." That night I didn't rage or panic. I methodically backed up my work, my client communications, my contribution records. I transferred my personal notes and contacts to my private accounts. I reviewed my employment contract, paying special attention to the non-compete and intellectual property clauses I'd negotiated years ago, when Westfield couldn't afford proper legal counsel. I searched my home office until I found the original drafts of our client acquisition framework, the one James was now supposedly refreshing. The one I'd developed before it was ever formalized in company documents. I photographed every page, every margin note, every iteration that proved its origins. By morning, I had compiled a comprehensive record of my decade at Westfield. Accounts brought in, revenue generated, methodologies created, teams built. Not in the company's revisionist format, but with dates, figures, and supporting documentation that told the true story. I also had a list of every ethical corner Victoria had cut over the years, the reporting discrepancies I'd quietly fixed, the client promises I'd fulfilled when she'd moved on to more exciting prospects, the credit she'd taken for work that wasn't hers, not for blackmail, but for protection. As dawn broke over the city, I made coffee and watched the early commuters begin their day. For the first time since yesterday's meeting, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. These people weren't just colleagues, they had been my professional family. We'd celebrated birthdays and promotions together, helped each other through personal crises, built something I'd been proud of. Now I understood that while I'd been building a company, Victoria had been building a narrative, one where my contributions could be minimized, my clients redistributed, and my position eliminated without anyone questioning the loss. I'd given Westfield a decade of my life. They were about to learn exactly what that decade had taught me. I walked into the office Tuesday morning with purpose, dressed in my best suit and a composure that had taken hours to construct. Victoria was already in the conference room with the partners, their quarterly review meeting in full swing. James hovered near the door, eyeing me warily as I approached my office. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, noting his obvious relief at my calm demeanor. He'd been expecting tears, anger, or resignation. Instead, he got a smile that nearly made him flinch. "About yesterday," he started, following me into my office. "I should have mentioned Parker sooner. It just happened so fast." "No need to explain," I cut him off, setting my laptop down and powering it on. "Business is business." His posture relaxed slightly, though confusion flickered across his face. He'd prepared for a confrontation that wasn't coming, at least not in the form he anticipated. "Victoria wants to discuss some account transitions with you later today," he ventured. I'm sure she does, I replied, opening my email. But I've actually scheduled a meeting with Richard Parker at 11. Would be rude to reschedule on such short notice. James blanched. Richard Parker? The CEO? We play squash occasionally, I said casually, though this was news to James. I'd kept my personal connection with Parker's CEO deliberately quiet. He called last night concerned about some inconsistencies in what he was told last week, asked if I could stop by and clarify a few points. The blood drained from James's face. Victoria should probably join that meeting. That won't be necessary, I said, turning my attention to my computer screen in dismissal. Richard specifically asked to speak with me alone. After James left, practically running toward Victoria's office, I sent a carefully worded email to our 3 largest clients, all of whom I'd personally brought to Westfield. I attached my private contact information in case of any transition questions, and reminded them of key commitments outlined in their service agreements, commitments that were contingent on specific team members remaining on their accounts. At 10:30, I left for my meeting with Richard Parker, without telling anyone except his executive assistant, who'd already been instructed to bring me directly to his office upon arrival. They told me you were stepping back from client work, Richard said after we'd exchanged pleasantries in his corner office overlooking the harbor. Said you were taking on a strategic advisory role, and that this young guy, James, would be handling our day-to-day. That was premature, I replied, placing a folder on his desk. In fact, there are several representations made during your last meeting that need correction. For the next hour, I walked Richard through the actual capabilities of Westfield, the real timeline for deliverables, and the verifiable experience of the team that would be supporting his company's needs. I didn't disparage James or Victoria directly, I didn't need to. The facts spoke clearly enough. This isn't what we signed up for, Richard said finally, leaning back in his chair. We chose Westfield because of you, because of the team you built and the approach you developed. I understand, I nodded. And I want to assure you that whatever happens next, your company will receive exactly what was promised, either from Westfield or from my next venture. Richard raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting you might be leaving? Let's just say I'm evaluating options, I replied carefully. But I'd never leave a client without proper support. That's always been my policy, as you know. When I returned to the office, Victoria was waiting by my door, her smile tight and professional, despite the anger evident in her eyes. Where have you been? She asked. We've been trying to reach you all morning. Meeting with Richard Parker, I said, moving past her into my office. Clearing up some confusion about team responsibilities. She followed me in, closing the door behind her. You had no authority to meet with Parker. James is managing that account now. Actually, I countered, the contract specifically names me as primary contact, Section 3.2. You might want to refresh your memory before the partners ask why our biggest client is suddenly threatening to invoke their termination clause. Victoria's facade cracked. You're undermining this company. No, I said evenly. I'm protecting my clients from misrepresentation. Something you used to value before margins became more important than integrity. The partners want to meet with you tomorrow to discuss your role going forward, she said, regaining her composure. Given your concerns about recent changes, I look forward to it, I replied with genuine warmth that visibly unsettled her. I have some concerns to share with them as well. After she left, I received 3 messages in quick succession. One from Richard Parker confirming our conversation, one from Marcus asking to meet urgently, and one from a former colleague who now headed talent acquisition at our largest competitor. The chessboard was set. Now it was time to decide which pieces to move first. Marcus was waiting for me at a dimly lit pub 6 blocks from the office. He'd chosen a booth in the back, partially hidden behind a brick column, a detail that spoke volumes about his state of mind. As head of operations, Marcus typically conducted business in full view, with nothing to hide. They're dismantling everything we built, he said as I slid into the seat across from him. His normally meticulous appearance had given way to loosened tie and disheveled hair. Victoria's brought in consultants to streamline operations. They've already identified redundancies. Let me guess, I replied, signaling the bartender for 2 beers. Most of those redundancies happen to be people who've been with the company since before Victoria arrived. Marcus nodded grimly. 7 team members received consulting project assignments yesterday. All off-site, all minimum 6 months duration. It's a soft exit strategy. Get them out of the office, transition their responsibilities, then eliminate their positions during restructuring. I wasn't surprised, but the calculated nature of the plan still stung. And Diane? They've divided her clients among 3 junior account managers, told her she's being promoted to client experience strategy, whatever that means. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. She's furious, but playing along while she figures out her next move. The bartender delivered our drinks and we fell silent until he moved away. I met with Parker today, I said, taking a slow sip. He's not pleased about the bait and switch. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Victoria's been telling everyone the transition went smoothly. That was before Parker realized the team promised in the proposal won't be the team delivering the work. I pulled out my phone and showed him an email that had arrived an hour earlier. He's invoking the review clause in their contract, demanding a full accounting of team credentials and experience before proceeding. A smile crept across Marcus's face, the first I'd seen in weeks. That's going to be awkward for tomorrow's partner meeting, especially since 2 other clients sent similar notices this afternoon. I slid my phone back into my pocket. But that's just leverage. We need to decide what we actually want. Marcus looked at me sharply. You have a plan. It wasn't a question. In 10 years of solving problems together, he'd learned to recognize when my mind had shifted from assessment to action. Several options, I corrected. But I need to know where you and Diane stand. Are you looking to fight for your positions, negotiate exits, or start something new? The directness of the question seemed to center him. He straightened his tie and considered for a long moment. Westfield stopped being the company we built the moment Victoria convinced the partners to chase growth at any cost. His voice carried both resignation and resolve. I'm not interested in clinging to something that doesn't exist anymore. I nodded, understanding completely. Talk to Diane, see if she feels the same way. If so, meet me at my place tomorrow at 8. Bring your employment contracts and any documentation of your contributions to the company's methodologies and client success. What about the partner meeting? Marcus asked. Victoria scheduled it for 9 tomorrow. I'll be there, I assured him. But by then I need to know exactly what cards we're holding collectively. Walking home that evening, I felt a strange lightness despite the uncertainty ahead. For months, I'd sensed something wrong in the company's shifting priorities and Victoria's increasing secrecy. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also cut through the illusion that Westfield was still the place I'd helped build. In my apartment, I spread documents across my dining table. Client testimonials, revenue reports, methodology frameworks, team development plans. 10 years of work that had transformed a struggling consultancy into a sought-after firm. Evidence, not just of what I'd contributed, but of what Victoria was systematically erasing to rewrite the company narrative. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. V asking it for access logs to your files and emails. Said it's for transition planning. Be careful. Too late for careful, I thought, as I continued organizing documents. Tomorrow would be about something far more decisive than caution. By 7:30 the next morning, my living room had transformed into a war room. Diane arrived before Marcus, carrying a leather portfolio filled with client correspondence and a flash drive containing what she called her insurance policy. Detailed records of promises made versus services delivered across all accounts. They've been cutting corners for over a year, she explained, spreading printouts on the coffee table. Charging premium rates while reducing delivery scope. I've been documenting the discrepancies in privately managing client expectations. To prevent blowback, Marcus arrived minutes later with his own collection of evidence. Staffing projections that had been altered to justify hiring freezes. Operational metrics that had been selectively presented to partners. Budget allocations that didn't match. Approved plans. Victoria's been building a case for radical restructuring by manufacturing inefficiencies, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Creating problems to justify solutions that consolidate her control. For the next half hour, we compared notes and assembled a comprehensive picture of what had been happening at Westfield. The pattern was clear. Victoria had been systematically undermining the company's core strengths while positioning herself and her chosen allies, including James, as saviors with fresh solutions to self-created problems. She's brilliant, in a destructive way, Diane admitted reluctantly. She identified everyone who embodied the original vision and methodically isolated them. But why? Marcus asked. The company was thriving. Our client retention was industry-leading. Because she didn't build it, I said simply. And what you don't build, you don't value. She wants Westfield remade in her image with no one left to remember it was once successful without her approaches. We fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't just about our individual positions. It was about the deliberate dismantling of something we'd created, something that worked. So what do we do? Diane finally asked. Fight from within? Legal action? Competitive startup? I leaned forward, placing 3 folders on the table. I see 3 viable paths. First, we use our leverage with clients to force the partners to intervene. High risk, moderate reward. Even if successful, we'd be working in a hostile environment. I opened the second folder. Alternative 2, negotiated departures with favorable terms. We have enough documented misconduct to make Victoria nervous about what might emerge in wrongful termination proceedings. We could secure strong packages and move on separately. Marcus frowned. That leaves clients vulnerable to her approaches. It feels like abandonment. Which brings us to option 3. I opened the final folder containing a preliminary business plan. We resign simultaneously, with proper notice and transition support. We start a new firm focusing on the values and methodologies that made Westfield successful originally. We don't solicit Westfield clients directly, but we make our services available if they choose to follow. Diane picked up the business plan, scanning it with practiced eyes. This would mean walking away from everything: compensation, stability, client relationships we've nurtured for years. Not walking away, I corrected, taking it with us in the only form that matters: our knowledge, our approach, our integrity. Victoria can have the company name and structure. We'll take the soul. Marcus exhaled slowly. You've been planning this longer than just the past 2 days. I nodded, not bothering to deny it. I've felt something wrong for months. Started exploring options when Victoria began sidelining team members who questioned her decisions. The Parker situation just accelerated the timeline. They exchanged glances, a decade of professional partnership evident in their wordless communication. I'm in for option 3, Marcus said finally, but we need to be strategic about timing and messaging. Diane nodded her agreement. We'll need startup capital, infrastructure, possibly legal defense if Victoria pursues non-compete enforcement. Already researched, I assured them, pulling out additional documents. And I've had preliminary conversations with potential investors who know our work. But before we commit, everyone needs to be certain. This isn't just a job change, it's rebuilding from foundation. As they reviewed the materials, I checked my watch. 40 minutes until the partner meeting. Time enough to finalize our approach. Whatever happens next, Diane said quietly, I'm glad we're facing it together instead of being picked off individually. I looked at my colleagues, my friends, and felt the first genuine hope since reading that Parker Industries email. Victoria had underestimated what she was dismantling. Some bonds couldn't be broken by corporate maneuvering. Some foundations ran too deep to excavate. The partners' conference room carried an atmosphere of practiced formality when I arrived, precisely at 9. 4 founding partners occupied one side of the mahogany table, with Victoria centered among them like a queen with her court. James sat slightly apart, his presence an obvious tactical choice, the fresh face of Westfield's future positioned against its supposedly outdated past. Thank you for joining us, Martin Green, the managing partner, began with rehearsed neutrality. We wanted to discuss some organizational changes and your role going forward. I nodded pleasantly, setting my single folder on the table. No computer, no phone, nothing that suggested anxiety or over-preparation. I appreciate that. Before we start, I should mention I've just come from a breakfast meeting with Richard Parker. The shift in energy was immediate. Victoria's composure flickered while Martin's expression tightened. Parker requested the meeting, I continued calmly. He had concerns about recent communications regarding his account management. That's actually related to what we wanted to discuss, Victoria interjected smoothly. We're evolving our client service model to provide more collaborative support. James has been designated as the primary. Richard doesn't want James, I said. My tone still conversational but firm. He made that quite clear. In fact, he's informed me that if I'm not leading his account, he'll be exercising his early termination option. Martin's gaze darted to Victoria. I thought you said Parker was pleased with the transition plan. Victoria recovered quickly. Initial feedback was positive. Perhaps there was a miscommunication about timing. It wasn't just timing, I interrupted, opening my folder and sliding a printed email toward Martin. Nor was it just Parker. Astoria Financial and ClearPath Technologies have expressed similar concerns. All three have contract clauses requiring specific personnel commitments. The partners exchanged glances as Martin read the email. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. These are our three largest clients, Helen Winters, the financial partner, noted with careful precision, representing approximately 38% of our projected annual revenue, I confirmed. All originated and managed by team members who are apparently being repositioned. Victoria leaned forward, her smile now razor-thin. This is exactly why we need to diversify client relationships. The company can't sustain dependency on individual employees. A valid strategy, I agreed, surprising her, if implemented transparently and collaboratively, not through deception and undermining. That's a serious accusation, James said, speaking for the first time. I turned to him with genuine curiosity. Is it an accusation when it's documented fact? The Parker proposal explicitly listed me as lead consultant with specific team members supporting. You represented yourself as that team when you knew the composition was changing. That's factually misleading, regardless of intent. Martin cleared his throat. Setting aside the communication issues, we do need to discuss broader organizational changes. Victoria has presented a compelling restructuring plan to position Westfield for next stage growth. I'm sure she has, I replied evenly. And I respect the partner's right to choose Westfield's direction. But choices have consequences, which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. I removed 3 sealed envelopes from my folder and placed them on the table. These are resignation letters, mine, Marcus Bennett's, and Diane Chen's, effective in exactly 30 days. We've outlined transition plans for all our clients and team responsibilities to ensure minimal disruption. The stunned silence that followed was worth every moment of the previous day's stress. Victoria's perfect plan, unraveling in real time. This is unexpected, Helen managed finally. Is it? I asked gently. When you systematically sideline founding team members, obscure their contributions, and reallocate their clients without consultation, resignation is the logical outcome. If this is a negotiating tactic, Victoria began. It's not, I assured her. It's a professional courtesy. We could have resigned without notice, taking our knowledge and client relationships with us. Instead, we're providing proper transition support and honoring our contractual obligations. Martin looked genuinely distressed. The 3 of you built significant portions of this company. Surely we can find a solution that doesn't involve separation. That opportunity existed months ago, I said, feeling neither triumph nor anger, just clarity. The current company culture no longer aligns with our professional values. We've decided to pursue new opportunities that do. Together, Victoria. asked sharply, finally seeing the larger threat. I smiled. We've worked effectively as a team for a decade. It would be foolish to abandon a successful partnership. The discussion continued for another 40 minutes, the partners oscillating between reconciliation offers and thinly veiled threats, Victoria attempting to salvage control, James growing increasingly uncomfortable as the full picture emerged. Through it all, I maintained steady professionalism, neither accusatory nor defensive. As the meeting concluded without resolution, Martin asked to speak with me privately. In his office, the carefully constructed corporate facade fell away. "You were my first hire," he said, looking suddenly older. "I trusted Victoria's assessment that we needed to evolve beyond the original team. Now I wonder what else I've misunderstood." I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. The company needed to evolve, but evolution builds on foundations. It doesn't demolish them. Martin nodded slowly. "What would it take for you to reconsider?" I studied the man who had once mentored me, now asking for rescue from a crisis he'd helped create. "That," I replied gently, "is a much longer conversation."